and welcome to the Mime Radio Show. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlan. Donlan is very Irish. There's only one town in Ireland that has the name Donlan like mine is spelled. So I thought I'd wear something in celebration of that, of the heritage where my family comes from. Yes, but I'm not going to speak in an Irish accent. We'll forget that.
So happy St. Patrick's Day. And instead of mime wine, we should probably have some mime Guinness.
All right. Cheers.
So
let me introduce our man behind the curtain first. Michael Diaz, our producer, guy with the toolbox that makes this all happen. Michael Diaz is somewhere behind that black night behind our images. So thank you, Mike.
Oh, well, who else is going to be on the show today?
Wow. This is a member of a very, very exciting and interesting and provocative group, as well as a soloist, Deborah Langerman.
Oh, yeah.
And her group, the United Mime Workers, were very important to the landscape of physical theater and I would say political theater and protest theater and just theater in general in the 70s and 80s. So let me read you something about her before we start. I'm excited about this. I remember watching one of their performances years ago, decades ago, and I was very, very impressed. Deborah Langerman performed for 40 years as a professional movement artist in a variety of genres. Her performances included classical mime, political and experimental theater, adapted fairy tales, and kabuki theater. As a founding member of the United Mime Workers in 1972, Deborah and her colleagues performed in a variety of venues in every corner of the world. Their work consisted of experimental, highly choreographed depictions of social issues, including a 45-minute long performance of a visual analogy of the capitalist system. Wow. Deborah conducted workshops in quotes, action theater, creating site-specific guerrilla theater, creatively turning traditional political protests into short educational theater actions and disruptions in non-traditional settings. Deborah also performed kabuki theater for 10 years under the direction of Japanese national treasure Shozo Sato. A complete archive of Deborah's work is housed in the Student Life and Culture Archives at the University of Illinois, Urbana. So let us welcome Deborah Langerman.
Hi.
Hello, Deborah. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All the way from Indianapolis.
I call it India No Place.
Deborah, I've long been a great admirer of your work, and I am so glad that you could join us. And as you probably already know, that one of our favorite questions to start off with is, how does an artist prepare? So when you're getting ready to perform or give a lecture or teach, what is it that you do to get yourself ready? And in particular, like, what do you say to yourself right before you step on to the stage?
Well, it depends on the audience. So if you're talking about an adult audience, that's different than a children's show. So I have to make that distinction right off the bat. But for adults, the last thing I say to myself before I go on stage is, fuck them if they can't take a joke. Because there's this nerves going on, right? And we did some really unusual stuff, and it was never sure how the audience was going to react. So to calm my nerves, I would kind of say to myself, you know, if they could do this, they'd be up here. So fuck them if they can't take a joke. And that phrase comes from back in the 70s, when there were a lot of cult religions and faux religions floating around. There was a group that had a fake religion that was kind of a spoof on all the religions, and they were a real thing. You can look them up. They're called the Church of the Subgenius. And they're one of my favorite groups. They have websites. You can see interviews with them. You can look at their savior, which is a guy with a pipe, Bob Dodds. And that was one of their mantras. They had mantras like slack off and fuck them if they can't take a joke. And so I kind of stole it from them, but it would kind of calm me down and say, okay, here we go. Now for children,
I was going to say, just before we go into the children, because I want to stay with the adult subject matter for a minute. So if they couldn't take a joke, how would that inform you? What would you do next in terms of this FM?
Oh, no, you just go on, you plod forward through the show.
Yeah. You wouldn't throw like tomatoes at them.
If you're getting no reaction, or if you're getting a weird reaction, you just plod forward. Like one time we were performing at a nursing home in an afternoon, and we were doing this piece, and this one old man kept yelling, "What in the hell are they doing? What in the hell are they doing?" And you just like, well, just that guy doesn't get it. You just keep performing.
Wow. All right, let's move to the kids. So how would you approach the kid audience?
Well, the kids, as they were coming into the grade school, because I would do total grade school performances. So there'd be like 500 kids filing into the auditorium. I would be messing around with the kids in the hallway as they were coming in, pulling stuff out of their ears, getting in line with them, chewing gum and doing naughty stuff, that kind of thing. Or the other thing that I would do, it depended on the situation and the format. I would put my makeup on in front of the children. Mm-hmm. So as they were coming in, they could see me putting on the mime white face.
That's fantastic.
They were more quiet when I would do that. They would pay attention.
That's really interesting, because it's almost as if there is no start to the show. You're playing with them as they're coming in, and you've already set up this playful environment, or you've invited them to your backstage where you're getting ready. And so exactly. That's a wonderful experience for kids to have that little sort of relationship.
The first half hour, if it was my traditional show of traditional mime, the whole first half hour was audience participation. So I would bring different groups up onto the stage, and they would do things with me. And then all the kids could do it in there where they were sitting as well. Mm-hmm. So I would get the entire audience moving and involved. And I was an expert at getting them all riled up and then getting them to be quiet.
Wow. It sounds like with the adult, even if you were dealing with difficult, provocative subjects, it sounds like there was a lot of joy in your performance. Like you approached your performance as a very fun, playful time. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think well, no, that's not necessarily true, but I was going to say, I think the genre lends itself to being joyful, but I guess it depends on the performance.
Yeah, when I say joy, I mean a deep, even your, which we'll talk about it later, your pieces.
Oh, on our part?
Yeah. I was going to say, even your pieces that were satirical and political in nature and socially conscious, I just felt there was a kind of a joy, not like ha, 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 but a joy. And it feels like there was a joy in stirring the pot and making the soup to a very nice place. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had fun doing it. And I think that showed to the audience, right, that they have fun doing it too. Even if the subject matter is serious, people would refer to us rather than joyful as more cerebral. We did a lot of stuff that, it took a lot of, it took us 2 years to write our piece. And that was our pieces. And that was after lots of studying together and scholarship, and only after, studying works together and reading things together and talking about things did a piece evolve. So
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
pretty complex.
I want you to go back and sort of tell us about your early training, because I know that you studied at U of I with Claude Kipnis, and I'd like to know a little bit about what that was like, and how the United Mime Workers actually evolved into a performing group. So
yeah, also talk about the times too, this boiling pot of social unrest and so forth in those early, because that definitely informed my whole approach to theater, as being alive at that time, with wars and assassinations and civil unrest, all these crazy things that were happening, hippies, drugs, all that crazy collision of influences.
Well, like we were talking about earlier, and you're from the same era as I am. I went to a fabulous high school that was the #1 high school in the country. But the year I graduated, 1968, was probably the most tumultuous year one of the most tumultuous years in the 20th century in the United States. You had the Democratic National Convention. Right when I was graduating, Martin Luther King was killed, and then a month later, Bobby Kennedy was killed. When you see the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and it goes in a V like that, it's because the top of the V is 1968. So it was the most American soldiers killed in Vietnam during 68. Then you had the Democratic Convention, you had the My Lai massacre. I mean, there's just a lot that went on during that year. So that informed the way I looked at the world, because the world was pretty crazy. And I was in a lot of demonstrations against the war, as we all were. And the mime workers got together. Claude Kipnis was an artist in residence, and he came to the university in 68, which is when I arrived. And he started a small little troupe of people to help him put on performances. And I was in his original troupe. And he was a classical mime. He had studied with Marcel Marceau, and he did classical mime, but he was excellent. It was a little bit weird performing with him, because he would never rehearse with us on stage. He would wait until the performance to get up and do his thing. So we never quite, and he would be talking to us under his breath when we were on stage with him. So he had this little mime troupe that he developed. And then I think it was my sophomore or junior year, he came up to me and said that he was creating this professional mime troupe and I was not going to be in it. So it was like an unceremonious goodbye. So meanwhile, my senior year, I took a class in Kabuki theater because Shozo Sato was teaching at the university. He was an artist in residence. And it was there that I met the two other members of the United Mime Workers, Bob Feldman and Jeff Glassman. And they were in this Kabuki theater class. And I knew that they had studied with Claude and they had their own little mime troupe. Mm-hmm. It was called the Hardcore Mime Troupe because they were the hardcore of the class.
Yeah.
And I saw their performances, but I wasn't part of them. And then the summer after the year I graduated, we decided to perform in Chicago. We performed at the original Body Politic Theater every single weekend for the summer of 1972. And that's kind of how we got our start. We were the Hardcore Mime Troupe still then. And then there was a...
Can I stop you there a minute? Let me stop you there a minute. So those many people are not really aware of the United Mime Workers. And if you have the word mime, there's certain images that come to most people's head. But could you explain how you would define who the United Mime Workers or the kind of work that you did? Because it's very unique. And I think it cuts across the stereotype of what the word mime signifies to most people. And also maybe talk about how you, like you're being interviewed by us who have, have backgrounds in mime. Why would we seek you out to be on this program? You know what I'm saying? Because
I don't know that. Why would you?
well, but it's very important, and there is a link there. I just wonder if you could, in your own words, if you could kind of tell us how physical theater informed what you did and how you took it to new places, and how you mentioned something about the cerebral quality, which I believe in myself. I think if you don't have good material that connects to something in the universe, that you're not going to be very successful. So how does this all mix together to be called the United Mime Workers?
Well, the United Mime Workers obviously is a play on United Mine Workers. And, we were I would call all of us democratic socialists. So we liked and we loved looking at economics. That was really important to us as a subject matter. But we took other classes together, not just Kabuki theater. We were also in a cybernetics class together and a heuristics class. So we were learning about systems and how systems worked. And we were also in a music composition class where we talked about how to compose. And the elements of composition can apply to any format that you're using, right? In any art form. So when the assignment would be given to compose something in this composition class, we would do it in movement, where some of the other students would do it in music. So we had all of these different influences coming at us because we were based at the university. And the university was a very rich place for exploring all kinds of stuff.
Right. Now, how do you explain the physical angle? Like, you took the Claude Kipnis workshop. Why did you choose the physical form of communication rather than musical or stories or journalism or whatever?
Because none of us were musicians or writers. We were physical theater people. I mean, that's what I had been doing. Yeah. I mean, I literally have been doing this work since I was 5 years old. I have a picture of me performing a backyard circus with my brothers in the backyard. And I used to bring it in and show it to kids when they would say, "How did you get started?" And I would show this picture of me in my little tutu, and we were putting on a backyard circus because that's what we did. My dad built a stage with curtains and spotlights, and there was a drum set on there and a piano. It was in our basement. So I was putting on shows from the time I was 10 years old and I babysat for kids in the neighborhood, and I'd have the kids doing shows on that little stage. So I'm the only person I know that's been doing the same work for my entire life.
Before we move on, so in maybe 2 sentences, define the United Mime Workers, like in your words, like what, if I had never heard of them or never seen them, or I was from the moon, like what would you say that you did?
It's so hard to describe. We would do, well, it's maybe better for me to talk about how we composed.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be very interesting to me.
Okay. So we usually started with 3 different fields of conversation. The first one would be, what do we want the piece to be about? What's the subject matter? What is bothering us these days? What do we want to comment on? Mm-hmm. So in the case of our long piece on the capitalist system, which was a visual analogy to the capitalist system, we said, we want to talk about capitalism, and we want to talk about how this system robs workers of their money while, controlling them in all kinds of other ways. That's the subject matter. The other area of conversation would be new techniques we wanted to try. Do we want to have 3 screens and move in between them? Do we want to work with shadows? One time we projected slides onto our bodies that were completely white. We were always experimenting with the form. So we would have these discussions about what do we want to play around with that hasn't been done before. Because we never really wanted to do straight classical pantomime unless we were working with children.
Yeah, Claude Kipnis said he didn't want you in his troupe. So that says something right there. Right.
So the third area of discussion is how do people view things? If we do such and such, what is the audience going to see? So we always talked about things from the point of view of how the audience is going to see something in a new way. Our goal was always to get the audience to think about something or see something in a new way that they had never thought about before. So we didn't want to imitate anybody else or do anything that they may have seen. So when those three subject matters come together, that's when you know you have the piece, because that's the only piece it can be. It's not like just doing mime and doing classical mime and then picking a subject matter and doing it. It's really, the final piece is an amalgamation of all that long discussion. So for Mime is No Object, the reproduction of the working day, which is the one about capitalism, we studied a book, Harry Braverman, Labor and Monopoly Capital, which is a great book that makes one see how it's possible to profit off the work of others, which is a uniquely human thing. You don't see it in the animal world. You may see animals, doing certain things you don't expect them to, but they don't profit off of somebody else's work, as far as we know. So, and then there's this famous IWW, which is the old Wobblies, the International Workers of the World. There's an old poster that they have. It's like a wedding cake, and the workers are at the bottom, and it says, "We work for all." And then right above them is the bourgeoisie, and it says, "We eat for you." And then there's the military on top of that, and it says, "We shoot at you." And then the layer on top of that is religion, and it says, "We fool you." And then you have the government and the law on the top tier, and it says, "We rule you." And then at the top of the whole thing is a big bag of money. And it's a very famous poster. And in a way, that's what we tried to do with this piece, is to show that system of capitalism, but we did it in a really quirky way.
Yeah.
And you said that your process was pretty long. So there's three people in the troupe, and you're working on a piece for over a long period of time. Is it a collaborative? Did you have specific roles for each of you to work on, or was it everybody equal?
Not until it approaches the end stages, because then we would kind of divide up, because at the beginning, it's all just general discussion. We always had a fourth member, but the fourth member changed over the years.
Oh.
So we had a series of, I think, 4 fourth members that came and went. Because
sounds like a band. That sounds like the profile of a band, rock and roll band.
But the 3 of us were together for the full 15 years. But so we would discuss and discuss and discuss and make notes and discuss. And as we get closer to figuring it out and trying it out on stage and constructing things, then there would be a division of labor. So for this piece about capitalism, we also had a score, a written score for the work. And it's hard to describe it, but it was a linear depiction of where all the objects went. We used real objects in this show, where all the objects went on stage, where they were at any given time. And it went down the page as in time. And there were 3 of us, 3 performers. So there were 3 overlays in plastic. And the score was, I want to say 18 feet long. So we had to have 3 6-foot tables to lay this thing out.
Would you show that to the audience at some point? Would you, or
we would put it out in the lobby so they could see it before they were going in. And then I'm the one that hand drew these transparencies. I rolled out these long transparencies, and very carefully, each object had a different color. And then it went in time. And you can see everything is in unison and working fine until the capitalist comes into the picture and starts gumming up the works. And then all the objects go in a different direction than they're supposed to go. He's able to make a profit.
I remember watching your performance. I can't remember where it was, but I saw a live performance of the work you're talking about. And I remember your group and you talking about this process of the scoring of the piece. And it was very interesting to me. And I always thought that your work, along with Mummenschanz, which, the Swiss mask, they tended to use a lot of musicality. I'll call it musicality in their work in terms of stasis and movement and stillness. And I felt that your work was similar. Maybe you had different tools, but it was very, very informative, and it impressed me. And I felt I was somewhat influenced by what my contemporaries are doing in terms of, because we're all the same age. And,
we actually met the original Mummenschanz.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah,
a festival in Graz, Austria, back in the day.
Yeah,
and we went out to eat with them, and I knew that they were going to be famous. This is when they were first starting, before they had come to the United States.
Yeah, we're trying to get a hold of Floriana Fassato right now that
would be great.
Talk. Yeah. Anyway, keep talking.
Would be great.
So
yeah, so you're mentioning Austria. You guys took your shows like all over the place. Tell us a little bit about that experience of being with that group.
Yeah, but finish the story about Mummenschanz.
Let me just finish the score.
Yeah.
So when we laid out the score, as people were coming in, we had all kinds of people talking to us saying, this reminds me of a thing that we do at work. I sell clothing, and we have this flow chart of where all the clothes need to go. Or somebody who was in medicine says, this looks like electrocardiogram. Or somebody in music would say, well, I could put different values, different instruments to the different colors on the page, and I could perform this score. So we always had very interesting discussions around this score, and people trying to relate to it from the point of view of the work that they do.
Yeah.
So just to finish with Mummenschanz. So when you met them in Austria, you had some kind of meeting of the minds, perhaps, or some kind of.
Well, we were at this festival, and we had just come from a mime camp in Poland, and we were going to a mime camp. We went to 2 mime camps in Poland, and we went to this festival in Austria. And so we were seeing all kinds of stuff that we had never seen before. And obviously their stuff was so amazing and so different, and so very different from what we do, but it was fabulous.
Yeah.
But when you say a mime camp, this is a part of it was like a school, or what was it?
So we met this Polish mime company. They came to the United States to perform, and we talked with them afterwards. We went to the after party. We snuck in, and they said, we're going to have a international mime camp in Poland. Would you like to come? And we were like, yeah, of course we would. So they invited us to it, and out of that, we booked a 6-month tour of Eastern and Western Europe. And we started in Poland, and this mime camp was in a tiny little town in the northern part of Poland, Szczecin, which
so this is a place where different artists would collaborate, or just mix and talk. And
we stayed in a dormitory, and then we would have exercises in the morning, and then there would be classes. There was an old ballet teacher, and it was hilarious. We did ballet classes. We were terrible. We did mime classes in the afternoon. We looked at each other's performances. we did performances for them. And then there was another mime camp further on, and that was more international. Mime was very big in Poland back in the day. So there were all these Polish mime companies, and these mime camps were sponsored by them. So we would live for 2 weeks and just perform physical theater.
Did any of the big sort of name Polish mime artists come, like Tomaszewski or any of those people?
No, they were very familiar with Tomaszewski, but it wasn't Tomaszewski himself.
Yeah.
So then you were also on tour, and this was in the time when, you know, what we called the Iron Curtain. You were on the other side. And how did that work out? How were you able to do that?
Well, in Poland, you know, we were at these state-sponsored mime camps, so that was good. In the middle part of it, we were in Warsaw, and it was pretty bleak. And it was very affordable for us. You could get a big cup of borscht for a nickel. You know, you could eat a meal for under $1. It was not as scary as Romania. Romania was the scariest place that we went. And we did a 6-city tour of Transylvania in the Carpathian Mountains. And they gave us a full school bus with our name on the side. And we had a 10-person crew. And we were told not to fraternize with anybody, but they all invited us to their homes to have some kind of a meal. And so they would tell us, don't tell anybody else.
Were your tours like arranged with the United States government or with the foreign governments or with individual people?
Okay, so the ones in Poland, it was these individual groups that invited us. And then there was a time in the middle. For Austria, we were supposed to perform for the US Embassy. They were sponsoring our visit. But at the last minute, they told us they canceled our performance. So that left us a whole month with no income. And that's when we got invited to this orphanage in the hills of Austria. And we stayed in this orphanage and performed with these kids. We got free room and board. It was amazing. The other embassy connection was in Romania. We would not have been able to get into Romania without being sponsored by the US Embassy. So our trip.
Did you feel that there was an attraction to your work in that part of the world because you were maybe, I don't want to say anti-capitalist, but maybe you were, I don't know. But would you say that your work was more in terms of, you know, lended itself more to socialism? Is that some of the...
Not that particular show. That particular show had short pieces. There were short commentaries on things. Some were just funny things and weird ways of looking at a particular theme. But one funny thing is we had this piece called Chaos, and it was about the workings in a restaurant. And the bowl goes around until one of the workers decides to sit down and eat out of the bowl instead of doing his work. And then I realize I'm the waitress, and I realize that he's not doing his work and I'm being bossed around. So I sit down and have something to eat with the customer. And it was kind of a little mini version of what socialism would look like if everybody stopped ordering everybody around and we all just sat down and ate together. Well, we had to do this piece in front of censors because they had to make sure in Romania that everything was okay. We could not go on a tour of Romania and not have the government look at our work.
Yeah.
And when we performed that piece in Poland and Romania, they all thought that we wrote it for their system. They said, how did you know that this is what restaurants are like in Poland? Or how did you know that this is the way things work in Romania? And we were like, well, we did.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the United Mime Work is I think you found a universality within about the worker or the every person. You know, there's a commonality of whether it's socialist or capitalist or whatever, there's this common thread of life that I think you really hooked into that played to large audiences.
Don't they say that mime is the universal language, which I found not to be true. To some degree it is. To some degree it is. But there's all kinds of culturally specific gestures that we don't know about and that mean the opposite thing, yada, yada, yada.
But the brain, the thought is very similar. You know, humans are humans, and that the tools might be different.
That's true.
Yeah. That's what I think is very interesting about your work. But
behind, let me just finish. Behind the Iron Curtain, we were censored, and in Romania, we were followed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what happens when you're in Cuba. Like I've recently performed in Cuba, and there's somebody that says they're your friend, but they're really checking in on you all the time. But I was going to say, the United Mime Workers use props. I mean, you know, just so people understand, we're not doing the classic, you know, thing with whiteface. You know, it was theater that was gestural, but props played a very important. I mean, real physical things and sets played an important part in your work. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah, but never for no reason. Like one of my favorite pieces was all these white objects that had words on them, and the words would appear and then the words would disappear, and we would have a dialogue with one another by when we showed the words, and then the words would disappear. And it was the sense of the piece made one sense going one direction, and then we repeated all the sentences and the movements in reverse, and it made a different sense when it went in reverse. And that one was also really well liked in Europe.
I think that discipline and precision is a real strong aspect of mime, that it applied to any kind of physical theater makes it clearer and more precise, which is what I always admired about your work, the precision of the three performers working together, and the partnership that you had to do that creative work. Do you have...
the longer you work with people, you kind of become in sync in a way too. We had this sense of where we were on stage and how we bounced off each other because we really worked all the time together.
I remember meeting the three of you at a conference and being just so like envious of this partnership that you had, and saying, well, how did you find each other? And said, well, we were studying together. I was like, wow, I wish I had those people like that I could perform with. It was like that's what the partnership on stage was to me, that I really enjoyed watching it and envied it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
How did your work evolve? Like we've been talking a lot about the United Mime Workers, and then you have this whole other part of your history as a mime artist or a physical theater artist. Like how did the work evolve? Like at one point the Mime Workers discontinued, and what happened then with your career?
Okay, so with the mime troupe, the way we evolved is again through discussion and all these other classes. We started out with classical mime, performing for children. The University of Illinois paid for all our brochures and all this kind of stuff because we were sent out as ambassadors from the university. So they'd send us to do performances in school, and in return, we got paid in-kind services like printing and brochures and stuff like that. And then we continued with Kabuki theater, and we did some Japanese theater together, just the three of us, that was designed by Shozo. And our pieces were pretty simple and short pieces, but they were always experimental. So they were always, each piece was unique. And some used props, some didn't use props, some used noises, some used, like I said, printed words on objects, slides projected in space that we reflected onto us. just different experimental things.
How did the Kabuki theater inform your work? I mean, how did that influence what you did at that time and later?
Kabuki is amazing. You have to learn how to do all these things with your body that you're not used to doing. And I learned how to do fan dancing, and I had to do a whole thing. And when the fan does certain thing, it's like mime. When you unfurl it, it's like flowers blooming. Or if you're holding it and you're going like this, you're writing a letter. So, but the discipline in Kabuki, and Shozo always made us clean off the stage before we started performing.
The ritual, the important ritual.
The rituals. We were never to put our feet on the furniture in the theater. I mean, he taught us all kinds of respect and ritual, and that informed us greatly. He asked us if we wanted to form a professional Kabuki company with him, and we decided to go our own way.
Yeah.
So
there's a wonderful photograph of you in Kabuki makeup that we'll probably put on the website.
Good
regalia. Yeah, that ritual and that respect for the form is so important. My first mime teacher was a Japanese person too, Yak Hakushima, who started in Kabuki and no theater. So yeah, I understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
And we learned, so Shozo wrote some pieces just for us, and they were very dance-like and very mime-like. And, that influenced the way we work too. And sometimes we would perform that on our own later because he gave it to us, that piece.
Yeah.
And we performed in Kabuki theater. They have this thing where the performer, and in Kabuki dance, changes costumes instantaneously. And it's done by running these threads through the kimono. And when you pull the thread, it uncouples the top kimono from the one underneath it. And as the performer steps forward into the light, the little people that are pulling the strings pull the costume back, and it looks like he's instantaneously appeared in a new costume.
Interesting.
Wow. And those little people in black are called kokens. So we were kokens, and we would learn how to sew these elaborate kimonos together. And then we were the ones that came out on stage, pulled the strings in the dark, and then he would appear in a brand new outfit.
Wow.
So we learned all kinds of stuff.
That's cool. So you're after, how long did the United Mime Workers tour together?
We were together for 15 years.
15
so
years.
So from about 1971 to 1985.
And did you like over the course of that come up with a repertoire, or did you have like you were performing just one show each and then you would go on to another show?
No, we had a repertoire at the beginning. That was our first show with all these different pieces with different experiments. Then we had the 45-minute piece about the capitalist system with the score. And then we had another long piece called Shadows Beyond the Benefit of a Doubt. And that was about how the media controls the way we think. And we had a talking TV. Both of those performances are online. The one that has the talking television, it's hard to tell what's going on because you can't distinguish, because we speak in that piece as well. So it's hard to distinguish by the audio what stuff is coming out of the TV and what is coming out of our mouths. So that's, anyway, so that's what we did. So
well, tell us a little bit about your guerrilla theater and well, I want to know about the Marxist infiltration of the CIA. All these things that you did on site and they were imbued with your political beliefs. Tell us a little bit about that chapter.
So our favorite theater people, and a country that I've gone back to for many, many, many years, I've been there 20 times, is Denmark. and they did something called action theater. And action theater is different from guerrilla theater.
Okay.
In that action theater, guerrilla theater, I say, is you write a show and you can perform that show wherever.
Okay.
It's hit and run, and it'll work for any situation. Action theater, or that's what they called it, was site specific. So you had to figure out what action you were going to do based on the place and time that you were going to be at. So when I was artist in residence myself at the University of Illinois, I did action theater workshops.
Oh.
And we would investigate, okay, where do we want to do this? What do we want to say? How are we going to do it and get away with it without getting in trouble? And then get away unscathed. So the CIA had come to campus and they were recruiting, and we all knew that they were going to come and have this recruitment seminar. And that's when the CIA was involved in the coup in Chile and the dirty war in Argentina. They were doing all kinds of nefarious stuff all over the world. So we're like, we can't have the CIA come to campus and not do anything. So all of a sudden I got this idea. This friend of mine used to drive around with his kids wearing Groucho Marx noses and glasses when he would drive around in the car. And I thought, that's what we got to do. We've got to get Groucho Marx noses and glasses and go to this seminar and put on these Marxist glasses. And so we went to the place, and we had guys in the hallway or outside the building protesting because they didn't look like they could belong to this meeting. They had long hair or whatever. They were the protesters. We all dressed up like we were coming to be wanted to be interviewed by the CIA. So we just fit in. And then we left our own literature on their literature table, yada, yada. Anyway, we decided at 5-minute intervals, we would put on these noses and glasses. So as the presenter would look out on the audience, he would see more and more Groucho Marxes popping up. And we called it a Marxist infiltration of the CIA. So I put on my nose and glasses, and the woman sitting next to me, the girl sitting next to me, she goes, "Why is everybody wearing these glasses?" And I'm like, I don't want to be recognized. If I'm going to be working for the CIA, my job might be to spy on you. So I don't want to be recognized. Anyway, we had 30 of us in these Groucho Marx noses and glasses, and we totally disrupt the meeting. They had to end the meeting. It was chaos. Yeah. And then they had sign-up times for the next day to be interviewed. We all went and signed up for a time to be interviewed, and we never showed up to the interviews.
I love it that it's like the Marx brothers, but it's the fifth Marx brother who is Karl Marx. So it's definitely Marxist.
We made the front page of the paper with a woman with her Groucho Marx noses and glasses. We totally disrupted that meeting. We did another one in a pre-med class at the university. That's one students wanted to do. We did one at McDonald's during lunchtime when it was really busy. And we used the McDonald's song against McDonald's because McDonald's was a huge donor to the Nixon administration and wasn't a very good organization at that time.
So these would be what you would, like in the bio I mentioned, disruptions in non-traditional settings. You would classify these activities as in that genre, correct? Yeah.
Right. The only traditional setting we ever did action theater was in the lobby of the big theater the theater complex on the campus. We started from both ends during intermission of all these shows. Everybody's out in the lobby, and we did a piece in the lobby that wasn't sanctioned by the performance space, and they were really pissed at us.
Did you feel, because you had such a close association with the university, and I know back in those days, universities were more protective or more nurturing of their artists or their thinkers, you know, in the campus community, students and professors, much more than now, I think. But when your work took you away from the University of Illinois, like when you became a librarian or when the United Mime Workers were touring, did you feel did you feel isolated from them, or did they, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, did you have a comfort zone with the university that maybe you tried to get away from at some point, or were you always felt embraced by the university? You know what I'm saying?
I think those were really good years for the university. They had all these artists in residence. The guy that was in charge, who was the dean of student affairs, he was an artist himself.
Okay.
And so he really supported a lot of individual artists, including us.
Right.
And as he left, or as we matured through our years at the university, there were just lots of opportunities that the university afforded us, just taking classes and being able to sit in on any kind of thought that was going on. We found that very stimulating.
Yeah. Do you feel that's still the case?
It's some people call it an ivory tower, but it's a small community, but because it's a large university, there's all kinds of good cultural work coming in all the time.
What's
just like any university campus.
Well, what's your take on it now, and the whole idea of young people using their art form for political or social change? Do you see the opportunities? Do you see kids that are interested in doing this? Do you think this?
Well, here in Indianapolis, there are some very good theater groups that do socially conscious theater. I'm not at a university anymore, so I don't really pay attention what's going on in the university.
My feeling is that in maybe 20, 30 years that, in other words, I feel the universities aren't servicing artists anymore like they used to, like these times you're talking about. I feel there's not enough face time, there's no money, it's too compartmentalized, or there's too many digital thing, like classes through Zoom or whatever. I'm feeling the sense of humanity that an artist needs to understand and to be nurtured in is lacking now in universities. And I feel in 20 years, there may not be drama departments. There may not be, young artists will have to go to private studios to learn about the craft. I just don't feel universities are servicing, whether it's their fault or somebody else's, I'm not sure, but I think it's a different time now.
A lot depends on the university. The University of Illinois has a huge performing arts center that they built.
Right, the Crane
art. The Crane art. So they're invested in a lot of performance arts that other universities might not, be as good for that. But in the case of the University of Illinois, I know that there's a huge money crunch. And a majority, I won't say a majority, but there's a huge population of Chinese and Asian students. And that's because they have to pay a lot of money to go to school there. And the school needs their money. Yeah. So, and they're driving, I don't know about now, but a few years ago, they were driving the fanciest cars around. There were people that had money that have come to the university. And, but I think, any large university is going to have a good cultural scene. It's just how you tap into it, I think. But I think you're right about the money. Did
you receive a gift in the mail, Deborah?
I did.
What are you talking about, James? What are you talking about?
I heard that the Mime Museum was trying to find.
There you go, James.
Oh, yes, you did receive a gift. There it is.
Ah, Deb, do you have a package to open?
I do.
Oh, please do open it.
I'm a little scared.
Oh, don't worry, it won't blow up.
Where's it from, Deb? Where's the return address?
It's the
Mime Museum. Can I come visit when I come up to Chicago, Karen? Can I visit the Mime Museum?
Oh, definitely. But we're trying to de-acquisition. We're trying to get rid of all of our extra stuff. So that's what we're sending you.
Oh. So I'm starting to understand what the Mime Museum is.
Yes.
All right, let's see. Thank you for joining us on the Mime Radio Show. Please accept this gift from the Mime Museum collection as a token of our thanks. It's a torn up protest letter.
What does it say?
Item found in the archive of United Mime Workers, a torn up protest letter from a Chicago public school PTA president who was objecting to the disrespectful political content of a school assembly show presented by the United Mime Workers 1986. What? Where did you get this?
I was there, Deb. I heard that woman at Center East.
You were not.
Wait, what?
They were doing a production of the president's clothes.
The president's new clothes,
right? And the woman stood up and said, "You can't show this to children. This is disrespectful of the office of the president." I have a very strong memory of that happening.
But where did you get the actual? Because it is the actual.
From the Mime Museum, of course. Deb, come on.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
That was a crazy. That was a showcase.
Yes.
And they literally closed the curtains on us and wouldn't let us continue.
Yes.
And this woman, she said, people are dying to get into this country. And how dare you do a show like that? And we're like, that's why we're doing a show like this. You missed the whole point.
Oh, yeah. Just completely over her.
Do you feel the United Mime Workers were successful in what you did? I mean, when you look back, how do you look back on those 15 years?
I think we were successful in what we attempted to do. Could we have done more performances? Could we have been a little more commercial and made more money? I mean, we just barely scraped by. We lived under the poverty level. That's another answer to your question about kids today. They can't afford to do what we did.
That's true. That's
they
very true.
Couldn't afford to live on, we lived on $12,000. That was the highest amount of money we made, was $12,000 a year. And that was big bucks. You can't make your living as an independent performer anymore. I mean, you guys know the struggle.
Right. Yes, that's true.
No, it's
piecing it together.
When you left the United Mime Workers, you actually started working as you worked as a librarian. You did performances in the libraries, and then you started your own company. It was a solo company, right? Once Upon a Mime, right? Right. Yeah.
So I worked at the Urbana Free Library, which is a really awesome little library, and they paid me. They hired me while I was still going to library school because they wanted my talent. And they wanted me to do shows. And I went into all the schools and did shows about the library every single year. So I would do like 6 shows on about the summer reading program. And then any performance I wanted to do at the library, I could do. Instead of going out, people came to me. So we did puppet shows, and every Thursday and Friday, we had storytelling hours, and I could do whatever creative program I wanted to do. I loved it. But then when we moved here to Indianapolis, my husband got transferred here, and my son was very young. I took a couple of years off because I didn't want to work. I mean, I was 42 when I had him. So I really wanted to stay home. But I started working again when he was 3. I went to a showcase for young audiences, and I saw all the performers performing, and I thought, I've been doing this for years. I can do my own solo shows. So then I became a solo performer.
How does one how does one through the, you had a 40-year career, how does one adapt to the changing physical nature of your being? I mean, how do you ease through the years? Like what, and I know you don't perform now, like how do you ease through the years, and what made you decide to stop performing, for example? Like what happens there?
There were two things. One, it was my body. Let's say I would drive to another town 2 hours and do 3 shows and then get in the car and drive all the way home. I could not get from the garage into my house. That's how stiff. And I did yoga every day, and I did swimming, and I kept all of that up. And so physically, it was becoming more and more. I had problems with my knees. I eventually had a hip replacement, and all that's not good for performing. But then I had what I call a retirement moment. I was working with kids after school, and these were kids that had a lot of problems in school and in their home life. And the kids were not interested in me at all. They were middle school kids. They didn't want to be there. They didn't want me there. And then one day I showed up and everything was shut down. And it was because a kid had brought a gun to school. And so they had to close the whole school. And I just said, it was like this retirement moment. And I was just like, I'm 58. I have problems with my body, and I do not want to be going to schools where kids are showing up with guns.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
How would you, let's say when you reached the age of 48, did you approach the work differently for those last 12 years? Or did you didn't have any tricks of the trade that you could?
No, because my work was not quite as physical as yours, James. I mean, I've seen yours, and I could never do, previous to that, I could never do the kind of stunts that you did. But you expend a lot of energy when you're performing for 500 kids. And a lot of times I would go into a school, do a show, and then do 3 or 4 workshops, like with all the second grades or whatever. Or if I would just go into a school and do all the second grades, I would come home pretty pooped out.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I did after that, I sold jewelry at art fairs, and that was really hard work. You're standing there in all kinds of weather for 3 days, and you're setting up a tent and tearing down a tent and putting up tables and being in the rain and the mud, and nobody's buying your jewelry. And like, why am I doing? And you're driving to all these different places. So it was easier doing mime, actually.
So you have taught, you have done workshops. I mean, how does that fit in your?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your teaching.
In your matrix.
Did you mostly teach young people, or did you teach at the college level too, right?
We also did the college level too, and we had different kinds of exercises to help people figure out how to take something, pull it apart, and put it back together so it has a new meaning. We would do experiments with our adult students like that. For children, it was classical mime because they pretend when they play. And that's how I would always start the workshop. How many of you pretend when you play? And they all pretend when they play. And so, I would just take them through a classical mime workshop.
Yeah, that's wonderful for kids.
I also did workshops. I worked with Sigfrido Aguilar too.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I saw that you had worked with him. We did a 10-city tour of Mexico, and he arranged helped us arrange the entire thing. And then there was a festival with some workshops in San Miguel de Allende, which we were at kind of in the middle of the tour. So we did like 5 shows. Then we were in San Miguel with Sigfrido, and then we did another 5 shows.
And it's a fabulous experience too. It's like, once you get used to what Mexico is like, and you kind of relax your United States mentality.
Right. We did our show about capitalism, and they understood it completely. And we always had discussions with the audience afterwards in Spanish and English.
Mhm.
And it's because of that and my travels that I am now fluent in Spanish. I never had formal classes, but they loved our show because
I'll bet.
it spoke to them about what it was like in the US, and we could
Mhm.
talk about the differences between Mexican culture and US culture.
Mhm.
What would be your advice for a young artist today that's interested in physical theater or devised theater with a physical approach?
Well, find somebody that you can learn from that, has a technique that speaks to you or that you feel like you can accomplish. But my biggest advice, and I did this on another radio podcast that we did, Women Mimes in the United States.
Right.
Don't be narrow-minded. Be open to all the things that you're interested in and have those things inform your work, not only the movement training that you get.
Mhm.
So in other words, if you're lucky enough to be in a university setting, collaborate with people from other departments that you wouldn't think would have anything to do with mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collaborate with musicians, collaborate with scientists, which we did. Collaborate with people that design computers. There's all kinds of ways to think about and to go about composing things. You don't have to just redo what everybody's done for years. You don't want to just be a mime clone, or a Marcel clone. You want to come
Right.
up with something that's uniquely your own. How you make a living doing that, I don't know.
Talk a little bit about being a woman in this field, because this is the field of mime and physical theater is pretty dominated by men, and you have a very long career as a female performer. It's okay, James. We can talk about this.
Yeah, it is dominated by men. I found an unusual thing when I was performing with Jeff and Bob, because the fourth member that was in our troupe was never a performing member, except for at the very beginning. No, there was another one that was a performing, but after that, they helped us compose. They helped do the business aspect. They were the eyes that were outside and looking in at us. But I forgot the question.
Were they male or female? Did you have?
Oh, they were male. Most of them. There was only two other females. But
Right.
When we were performing with Bob and Jeff, everybody would remember them. They would not remember me. For whatever reason, I did not stand out. So they wouldn't recognize me on the street and say, oh, you're from the United Mime Workers in Champaign-Urbana. Bob had a very distinguished looking, interesting, different looking face. And Jeff was tiny and you couldn't take your eyes off of him. He had a way of moving that was just magnetic. So everybody recognized them, but people had no idea who I was. And I don't know if that speaks to the way I performed. I didn't stand out enough, but I found that to be interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that the male kind of rose to the, I don't want to say rose to the top, but was more visible in the history of mime in this, the last 50, 60 years? What's your theory on that? Like, why would they remember those guys and not you? Like, what do you think? Like, how did that happen?
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense.
I really don't, unless it's the same thing that happens in all other fields. Men get recognized for being chefs, for example. Only now are women being recognized, or Supreme Court judges or whatever. We're always recognized last.
Whether you call it the patriarchy or the good old boys club, it happens that men have more opportunities than women.
So you feel it's
have more responsibilities than men in terms of the home and caretaking and those kinds of unpaid uncelebrated kind of roles.
So it's more the just the nature of the challenges of gender that has happened throughout history. Do you feel it's?
Yeah, it also could be. It also could be that the original guys earlier in the century were all men. You know, Decroix, Marceau, all those guys. Who am I forgetting?
Lecoq,
all those guys.
There's a whole list of them. Yeah.
Right.
Jean-Louis Barrault,
Yeah. So men perform with them. They in themselves may not have paid attention to their female students as much as they pay to their male.
The cultural, the problems of some of the cultural roots were maybe at the cause of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking
it never stood in my way with working with children. When I did Once Upon a Time, Once Upon a Mime, they were happy to have me. I performed in every single library in the state of Indiana. And the way I approached it, I said, I've been on both sides of the desk. I was a librarian. So I know what type of program you need. And I have written my program for you for the summer reading program. And you need a program at the beginning of the summer, or you need one at the end to celebrate the end of the summer. And so, I think being a female and having worked with kids got me a lot of jobs too.
Yeah. So I guess it works both ways, right?
It does.
Where could a young artist learn more about the United Mime Workers or yourself? Like, where could they go to access some of the information?
You can go online and type in United Mime Workers, and there are 2 videos. There's a video of our piece about capitalism, Mime is no object, and then there's a full video of Shadows Beyond the Benefit of a Doubt. But like we were talking, when we used to perform and when we worked with our composer friends, we would always talk about what are the traces that you leave behind.
Yeah, what's your legacy? Yeah.
We would talk about them as being traces. And as you know, the traces that you leave in performance are very fleeting. They're not what's the word? Not temporal. They're very ethereal. They only exist in the time of the performance between you and the audience. And then the trace is gone, unless you now have digital traces. But because I performed so long ago, I don't have many digital traces.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a website. I'm no longer performing. All of the videos that were taken of us were in old formats and it had to be converted to digital. So I don't have many traces online.
Is that unsettling to you, or is that?
But there is an archive, right? Tell us about that.
Right, process. But that you have to visit, and my big hope was that the archive would be digitized. But then here's another question about money. There's no money to digitize archives because you need somebody to actually stand and and digitize everything, scan everything. So you can only view my archives by going to the archive itself. It's in 5 boxes and you can check it out. It's in a temperature controlled building. And I don't know if you need to wear white gloves or whatever.
But that's where we would see the scores that you were talking about. Yes. Are those preserved? How fascinating.
Yes. Although I think Jeff might still have the score. He's about ready to be archived himself. And he has hundreds of boxes of stuff because he's continued to perform and he's was a really good note taker. So he has lots and lots and lots. He has boxes and boxes of traces.
So this notion of legacy is the lack of or presently, is that unsettling to you, or is it the fleeting ethereal nature is okay? That's just the way the nature of the world works. How do you feel about legacy in terms of what you've done? Or
well, because it was so fleeting, and because a lot of my friends have no idea that I did these things. That's another thing about women. nobody, when I meet somebody new, or you're at a party, or you're at a dinner party, or you meet neighbors, everybody asks my husband what he did for a living, but nobody ever asks me. They don't, nobody, because I'm a woman, you know, what's there to ask?
Well, that's Deborah, that's their loss, because you have fascinating stories.
But then I don't even know how to explain to them what I did. Because you talked about this on one of the other interviews. How do you explain to people if you're sitting on an airplane and somebody asks you what you do? I mean, it's hard enough to say you were a mime, but to tell them what I did, nobody has any clue to the amount of academia and intellectual work that I put in. If I say I'm a mime, you know, they just picture this. So sometimes I just said I just say I did mime.
What's the future? What could be done in the future? How do you see the future of the kind of art form that you've been involved in? Like, where do we go from here? How do we preserve legacy? How do we, if it's important at all? Like, what? I mean, in some senses, for you know, people to move forward, they must know about history in the past. You know, it's all, you know, we all know that, right? So
I think, you know, you guys have given me a little taste of wanting to go back to teaching again, because I think teaching is very important. It grooms the next group of people. There are groups out there, and I see stuff online. Have you ever heard of a group called Improv Everywhere? That they do improvisations out in the world. Oh, they do fascinating stuff. That's like the next generation of action theater. And people, I mean, the kind of, if we're just talking about action theater, the kind of actions that people do now are amazing. And they create all these memes, and they do stuff out in the street. And we all see it around the world. These flash mobs, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's a new direction of that. So I'm not worried about people doing political art on the street. I think that happens more than we're aware of if we keep our eyes open, and we get to see it on Facebook and places like that.
You know, there's amazing physical activities and skills that people have. Do you feel the mental has kept pace with that in terms of theater? You know, there's amazing, you know, moves and, you know, athletic of, you know, physical things that people can do, but I'm not so sure the brain, the imagination has evolved to the same level of
like
what
the
to
level
do with these tools.
The level of ideas that you as a trio generated, and the research that you did. I don't see many that level of depth,
immersion.
Unfortunately, I think in the theater world there's still lots of great experimentation and stuff going on. If you're talking about the mime world, unfortunately there's a lot of Marcel clones out there.
What's the solution to change that?
I don't know. We got yelled at every festival we went to of people saying, you can't do that. You know, after we would do the show, we were like, we just did it. Tell me what you think of what we did. What do you mean we can't do that? It wasn't what they were saying was, you can't do that and call it mime. And we were like, why not? It's art. Guess what? There are no rules in art.
Yes.
Art is the creative process.
Yeah.
You go ahead and do another wall and pull another rope and do a piece about life from a baby up to a senior crawling in his grave. Do the thing that everybody does. And that's fine. If you can make a living doing it, that's fine. But this is what I encourage people to do. Be interested in everything.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic manifesto, Deborah.
Yeah.
But Deborah, speaking of that, what do you want to be when you grow up?
That's a good question. I keep thinking about that because I'm at the point in my retirement where I have decided I need to be doing something. I need to get a small job or something because I'm going crazy. Of course, that's a lot of it is COVID, right? We were all stuck inside. And my husband in 2020 had stage 3 cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So we've had to be really careful and stay isolated in the house. I do a lot of crafting. That's how I enjoy doing my creative stuff. But
I think you should listen to what you're saying, because you have so much to offer, and you are representative of an artist and a time that the youth need to know about and need to interact with. I mean, I think it's important that, listening to you makes me want to teach. I have been teaching, but I'm taking a break at the moment. But it's just that this idea of communicating and handing down what we know is so important. And it's you're inspiring myself. So I think you should get out there and inspire people.
Yeah.
Well, I would teach again. I think I would not perform again. That's
you're at a different level of consciousness now, where the teaching
and
can
speaking
be
of,
deeper.
who wants to see a gray-haired old lady doing mime? It just doesn't.
I do.
You'd be surprised.
I love it.
Wow, Deborah, this has been fantastic, this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been so much.
Of it.
But wait, what do you want to be when you grow up? Just give me an answer.
You didn't answer that question, Deborah.
I don't know.
All right, well, that's good. That means there's more to know then.
A grandma. It's something I have to think about.
Okay.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you.